This head from the Igbo Ukwu Empire. And this is an example of how the white man stole our symbols. There on his head is his skull, and then the bones around his neck. It's like voodoo comes from West Africa. And just like when Abram went to Egypt and his wife Sarai, and Pharaoh liked his wife, and he told Sarai to pretend that he wasn't his wife. He was his sister, or he was his friend, or he's not his wife. And then Pharaoh said, take your wife and go, when he figured out what had happened, because he didn't want to offend God. Just like when Ramses and Moses were having a disagreement about the Jews and what their role should be and whether or not they should be allowed to leave, Pharaoh's heart was hardened by God. So God was trying to show you that long before the Jews were in Egypt, long before there was any Jews, the Egyptians had an understanding with God. And that understanding involved the Pharaoh embodying the Spirit of the Lord. There's like all the hieroglyphics and pyramid text and pictograph shows us that Pharaoh was the representative of God on earth, and he embodies the Spirit of God. Amenhotep, Tutmosis, etc., etc. Akhenaten. They're named after Egyptian gods. Seti the first, Amen for Amenhotep, Aten for Akhenaten, etc. So they understood that the devil was the great serpent Apep. They understood that God is spirit, and he goes into mighty men and righteous men and inspires righteous men. So long before you had European symbolism, there was African symbolism. Long before you had Native American shamanism, there was ancient African mysticism, the first religion of the world, dating back maybe as much as 500,000 years. Seriously. And as we go into a period where modern day history starts emerging, there's a reason why the Europeans start history when they do. Because it paints a certain picture. It's like putting the sun in a certain place in the sky in order to create a desired effect with the lights, in order to make the sun appear a certain way. It's the same thing with history. They put history in a certain place, a certain time and place. They start it there, and it appears a certain way, which is not necessarily the true way. So my argument is that the ancient Egyptian knowledge, going back to 100,000 years ago, migrated to West Africa, and one of the flourishing empires in West Africa. Remember, you have Timbuktu and other places in West Africa that are significant. Ancient stores of knowledge, ancient libraries. You have ancient empires, the Mali Empire. Who was the guy who gave the biggest pilgrimage to Mecca? He was a black West African Muslim from the Mali Empire. And he loaded up elephants and camels and horses with tons and tons of gold and did a pilgrimage all the way across Africa to Mecca. The biggest pilgrimage ever. Mansa Musa. Okay? He also gave away a lot of things for free. It was an African who started the salt trade. It was an African who gave away salt for free. It was an African that started collecting gold first. It was an African that founded Sumeria. It was an African Akkadian who founded Babylon. I mean, need I go on? Religion comes from Africans. The only one who knows what they're talking about when it comes to God is an African. And I would go as far as to say that if a person is not mixed with black, they have no chance of finding God. None. if they don't at least have a drop of black blood. That's like saying a radio can connect to a radio station without having an antenna. Yeah, it might be able to, but it's going to be so fucking staticky that you won't understand what the fuck is going on. The same way the racist white power structure doesn't understand what's going on. Thank you.